Hi, everyone. Welcome to another great episode of Aging in Action. Today, our topic is mental health and remote learning. We want to welcome two individuals with us from Rainbow District School Board. We have Mary Jago, mental health lead, and Emily Caruso Parnell, the principal of elementary remote learning. Welcome, ladies, to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. I think we pride ourselves on Aging in Action so much to touch so many topics when it comes to aging. And I think even though for me, this topic was so important on mental health and remote learning because there's so many grandparents, parents, students, teachers out there, and it's a new way. I couldn't even imagine what it was like to turn back the clock to spring of 2020 when all of a sudden we were going to be having this conversation on mental health and remote learning. I power to you ladies for the job that you're doing. And I know just previously prior to the show, Mary, we were kind of discussing a little bit, and you brought in some resilience of mindfulness. Can you kind of just touch base a little bit on that? Because I'm kind of curious what you mean.
So when we talked about mindfulness, mindfulness is a term that's used a lot these days. I'm not sure that there's always an understanding of it. And what we really want to encourage people to think about is being mindful means taking the moment and taking the time to just focus on right now in this moment. It's with purpose and intention to think about or do whatever it is that you're doing. So paying attention to this interview. This is all we're doing. We're not being distracted by our phones or our family or all of the other things that happen around us. We're taking this moment just to be here. And I think that there's so much busyness and distraction with technology and challenges and the news and everything that's happening that it sometimes means that we don't pay attention to what's actually happening inside of us and how we're feeling and how we're thinking, and that can impact our mental health. So we want people to have the opportunity to slow down, practice gratitude, take care of yourself, and when you're doing those things, to do it with intention and purpose. And if you walk away with nothing but do it with intention and purpose, that's what mindfulness is all about.
Emily, do you find that the students that are remote learning are obviously the challenges differ, I would think, between in class and the remote learning piece? Are they adapting successfully? Is there anything parents, grandparents, anyone can do today to, reinforce that mental health and take the time, focus on the task at hand? Any suggestions?
So we have 1,500 elementary students currently in remote learning in Rainbow. So there's certainly a lot of variability amongst them. It's hard to make a blanket statement about them as a group because they're, as different as any other group of people. Certainly kids that struggle to complete work or struggle with attention in the classroom are having those similar struggles in the online classroom. And sometimes those are exacerbated by the fact that you can have your Google Meet running, but then you could also have 4 other tabs going with video games, and you have access to lots of things in your house that you don't have access to at school. You have access to your games console, you have access to your dog, you have access to, it doesn't all have to be digital distractions. There's other distractions too. The flip side of that, though, is that for kids who may have sensory processing issues or may find school quite anxious making, some of those kids are actually having an easier time at home because they can control some of those factors that they can't control in the classroom. So they can control the lighting, they can control their seating, they can control, when they get up and go to the bathroom. They don't have to ask anyone's permission. They just get up, they take a step away from the computer, they come back after a couple minutes when they've reset. And, there's a lot of screen time, certainly, but the teachers are trying to be very mindful of the fact that kids need regular, what we call brain breaks. So they need to get up and they need to, do some exercise, do a quick, what we call DPA, daily physical activity break, and then come back and then get up again and have a drink, little 2-3 minute breaks throughout the prolonged periods when they're online are really helpful in just helping them reset their focus and attention so that they can go to the next thing. And so there's just a ton of variability in terms of how kids are doing and what's working for them and what's not working for them. Definitely, kids who have a calm, quiet environment to work in, with a minimum of distractions, and who have some regular adult supervision that's appropriate to their developmental level, are, definitely that's important, right? It's tough sometimes for parents uh, to know that a kid will say, well, I'm doing my work, and it may very well look like they are, but they may in fact just have 4 other tabs where they are actually playing things. And if the parent doesn't understand about tabs, or doesn't understand, that you can have multiple things open at the same time, then it is a bit of a learning process for us to teach the parent and say, or the grandparent, and say, well, it may appear that they're participating or that they're working, but really, in fact, here's the record of what they were doing online at that time. And we're able to share that with them. And then, oh, okay, we see what's going on now. Maybe we need to supervise a little more closely, because it's a lot. I mean, I know that how hard it is, let's say you're working on your computer and you also have Facebook open and it's pinging at you, right? That's a lot if in terms of your attention to block that out. And if you don't have the self-regulation capacity yet, because you're only 9, to block that or to shut it down, might not be Facebook at 9 years old, but it's something that's pinging at you, distracting you. If kids don't always have those abilities yet, just because developmentally they don't have them yet, and even adults struggle with those things. So definitely for kids it's a challenge.
Emily, you said 1,500 remote learners. What percentage of the school is that? Like, what percentage of students is that's learning remotely?
It's about 20. It's a little less than 20%. So 20% is pretty consistent across the province for the number of people who've enrolled their kids in remote learning. And
did that sort of shift over time? Like, did some want to do it right away and then others came on board, or did that change?
So early in September, we had closer to 1,800. And then we had some shifts really early on as people realized, oh, this isn't going to work. And then we dropped to about 1,700 from the period. We were at about 1,700 from the period of like mid-September to mid-November. And then in mid-November, we lost about 300, but we gained a little over 100. So we ended up at 1,500. So we gained some students and lost. We have switch dates throughout the year, pre-scheduled switch dates. So one was in November 12th. The next one is February 8th.
Because I was trying to put myself back in those days when my son had a learning disability, and it probably, he actually did take some courses at the time, through internet, and it worked well for him. But I was thinking, how would I as a parent be? I always said I would never make a good teacher because I'd be screaming or something, because I couldn't. So it takes a special ability, for somebody to help a child through.
And it's different when it's your own kid.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I was home from March to June with my own kids while I was working and they were going to school. And I'm certified to teach to grade 12. And I would say to my son, who was in grade 6 at the time, okay, so this is how you do multiplication of fractions, and we work through it, and this is what you do. And he'd say, I don't understand, Mommy. You don't know how to teach this. I don't get it. And then he would go on a Google Meet with his teacher, and I could hear them, and his teacher would explain it exactly the same way I had. And he would say, Mommy, Monsieur Francois understands. He knows how to teach this. And then he, there's a thing about teaching your own kids that is not always the most rewarding moment of your day.
Well, they kind of think they have selected hearing or so, because probably they tuned you out or tuned me out if I was the mom at home. So it's interesting how all of this sort of enhances some things, and then for some it must be just awful to go through this.
We're definitely trying to support people. I mean, people who are struggling, we're trying to put supports in place and make sure that they're as successful as they could possibly be. But undoubtedly, there are undoubtedly some challenges. People are being very resilient, and kids are being very resilient, and we're trying to frame everything in that way of, and Mary is helping us remember to frame things in a positive and in a mindful way, and making sure that we're we're really focusing on growth and on development and on progress, and that we may not be where we want to be, but we're way further ahead than we were. So let's focus on those gains.
Yeah.
So what if, can I ask, so you have approximately 1,500 students learning at home. So do you know if they're learning at the same pace and the same level as in class? Like are they following all the same curriculum? So the homeschool children will be at the same level as classroom children at the end of the year? Like,
So we're all following the Ontario curriculum. Everybody's following the Ontario curriculum for their age, for their grade. So that doesn't change, right? That's the same. Every class within a school is different, right? Every class within a school has a different makeup of kids, and they all start where they start, and so every year in every grade is a little different. You can't sort of say that there's a standard grade 3 trajectory, right? Some classes may go faster through some units and slower through others, and other classes may be the complete opposite. So even in a school where you might have 4 or 5 grade 3 classes, they're all going to be slightly different in terms of where their trajectory is. So, I mean, our classes are all slightly different at where they are, but the goal is to get them all through the grade X, Y, Z curriculum during the course of the year. Yeah.
Mary, do you think from a mental health standpoint that the kids are handling it better than the parents and grandparents or whatever adults are in their world? Are they more resilient than we are?
I think the kids do have some more resilience. If you see kids on a playground, they're still outside playing, right? They still are behaving in the way that kids behave. And they take their messages from the adults around them on how to manage. For the kids where they're not, where the adults are able to refrain from having discussions about all of the challenges around them, those kids tend to be more resilient. They have the adults who are paying attention, supporting. When Emily talked about supporting their time in class while they're remote students, it's also important to support them when they're doing too much work, because we find that that's happening as well. Okay. So supporting, the resiliency comes from supporting healthy activity, getting enough sleep, following those routines. Even like we often don't talk about it, but continuing in spirituality with whatever that means for you in your life, being able to support having those human connections. So for grandparents and for their grandchildren, right? We need all of those human connections. Children need time to relax, to giggle. Adults need time to giggle. We need time to be able to just enjoy those moments in life. But the more that students are able to focus on their concrete successes, then for them, that's how they go through life, right? Those things haven't changed for them. They don't notice if they can go to the grocery store or not. What they would notice if there's no food. And as long as we continue to provide all of their basic needs and do it in a way that lets them know they're still safe, we're still okay, the world has lots of good in it, those children will be doing well, relatively speaking.
That's great, thank you.
Mary, Emily, either one. A question that came to me when we were having a previous discussion about the mental health and remote learning, a couple of individuals that are, aging demographics, so we're talking the seniors in the communities that would often go into the schools, maybe do some reading, the programs that gave them uplift for the day, right? They loved going to spend time with the kids. Is there a way right now in this electronic platform that we are currently working with remote learning for those individuals to be able to interact with the students so they could still do reading, using their laptop at home and providing? Is there a way to mix still?
So this is relatively new for all of us. We haven't figured this out completely, but more and more we're finding ways to engage in exactly what we're doing right now A year ago, we would have been sitting in a studio or something somewhere. And here we all are figuring out how to make this work. It's the same with the storytelling. It's the same with the connections. We're doing meetings this way. Our social workers are able to meet with the students wherever they are, using a platform. We use Doxy.me, but there's different platforms. We just use one that's very secure, and all of the privacy needs are addressed. There are so many different ways, and it's really challenging us to be creative. How can we invite people in? And those connections are so important for all of our well-being, right? We need to connect with other people every day.
Absolutely.
I have a silly question here about the home.
There are no silly questions.
I just, I don't know. So one, like I have two grandchildren, and they doing the home, the remote learning. Anyhow, I just thought, and this is just me not knowing what I'm talking about, but I always wondered why didn't they just install a camera in his classroom so he could still see all his classmates? Because what I've noticed with my grandchildren is that that's what they're missing. They miss their friends, right?
Social time.
So the platform they're using is good. I've sat with my grandsons, I don't know how many Fridays, because sometimes I, do that to give the parents a little bit of a break. And, the platform's great, but you only see a couple little friends on there at a time, or classmates. But I don't know, like, why didn't do you know why they didn't go in the direction of just putting a camera in the classroom so the children in that class could just be in their class?
So it's very tough to teach that way well, right? So when you're teaching, I don't know what grades your grandchildren are in, but when you're teaching primary or junior grades in particular, you're not standing at the front of the class lecturing, right? You're moving all over the room. You're working with a small group. You're working one-on-one with this one. They're turning and talking to each other. They're up, they're moving, they're going to centers, they're back down at the desk. Like, it's not a static sort of Charlie Brown classroom where everyone's sitting in their desk looking at the person at the front. So for a teacher to teach those kids in the room well, and at the same time address kids on a screen and try to meet their learning needs, is like superhuman.
Now that you point it out that way, totally. Because I mean,
in terms of a task, and I don't know if your grandchildren are with our board or with, I can't speak to what other boards are doing in terms of how they're organizing, but it is totally possible for kids to see in our system all of the kids in their class at once. And we are trying to do things that are social. So I host a Google Recess every day for kids, where I'm in the meet and we play games and we play charades and we tell jokes, and some of the older kids I play video games with them, which I'm really bad at, and they enjoy that. And then the kids also do, some of the teachers leave their meets on at lunch so that the kids can just talk, and the teacher's sitting there eating and just sort of has an ear out to what's being said, but isn't, actively in the conversation. So they eat their lunch, and the little kids in Google Recess, that's what they do. They eat their lunch and we chit chat the whole time. That's all they really want to do. And then we're trying to do things like contests. Like we have a Get Outside contest right now where they put in a photo or a drawing of themselves doing something that they like outside. And then I draw a name at the end of the week and they get a prize. And so we're trying to build some community pieces. We have theme days. And, I've tried to really be very clear with teachers that the social piece matters a lot, and that kids need to feel connected to them. They need to feel connected to the other kids in their class. And I did, when I made our, and again, I can't speak to what other people did, but when I made our classrooms, I tried to keep kids from the same school together as much as I could, so that they would hopefully know a few kids in their class already. Maybe not, but hopefully they would know a few kids so that they have a few social connections already.
Yeah, sorry, Gwen, go ahead.
No.
Well, mine was just more of a statement. I'm glad, Lisette, you asked that question, because I was actually thinking the same thing. So
yeah. It sounded simple, right?
Yeah, simplicity, right?
Yeah.
And mine's just more of a statement. I'm glad, Emily, you're touching on that social piece, and you're explaining some of the activities that you're doing, because I don't have children. And I'm just thinking, if I was a child right now with everything going on, I think that would be the biggest mental health piece for me is I loved hanging out with my friends. I loved talking with my friends, playing with my friends outside. And obviously all of that is turned completely upside down, not only in school, but just in general with the whole pandemic going on. So it's nice to know that there's some creative ways that your classroom and your school board's doing. And I hope, some of the other schools are doing something similar into that capacity. And I can only imagine, as a kid, what it would be like to have to learn in this new world. And so, yeah, thanks for sharing that. I don't know if we're going to be wrapping up here shortly. I'm looking at the time. Is there any final thoughts that either one of you have that you want to share before we kind of wrap up this episode?
Emily, you want to go?
I would just say that, in terms of the hybrid thing where people are teaching live and teaching online at the same time, the things that make online learning work, there's like a whole bunch of tools that make it functional for any age group, right? So there's things called Padlet where kids can work together on a big bulletin board and they each put up their own idea and then they share that. There are breakout rooms, there are polls, there are just a ton of tools that you can use. And to do that at the same time as you're teaching kids live is like, I don't know that that's actually possible. And then we end up with privacy issues for the kids in the classroom, right? So the kids in the classroom now, want to talk about something and it's private. And then now it's being broadcast into people's homes, and there's just a whole host of issues around that. So I would say there's, that to consider. I think I'm proud of all the work we've done. This has been a real team effort in our board. I can't think of a person that hasn't somehow contributed to this pretty much. So, I think it's going really very well considering how big of a challenge it is. And definitely we have, we have the mental health piece front of mind.
And Emily just did what we promote all of the time: positive affirmation, finding ways to appreciate everybody, to appreciate the good moments in our life. We also call it gratitude, whatever language we want to use. One of the things that benefits our well-being is focusing on strengths and the things that make us feel good about ourselves, for ourselves and for others. And I think that if we can continue to be as kind as we can and be grateful for the good moments that we have, we're going to get to recovery and we're going to be well. So thank you, and be well, everybody.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you. And this has been a really great, interesting discussion that we've had. And so what we're going to do is we're definitely going to share the information on our website, www.aginginaction.ca. We are on all the social medias as well, as Joy was pointing out earlier. So make sure if any of our viewers are watching, you like and follow those pages. We want to thank both of you for taking time out of your day to sit and chat with us as we're having these discussions and helping our community age in action. So thank you both so much. And at this point, I think we're ready to wrap up our episode for today. So thank you all so much. And thank us for helping us age in action.